Okay, today we're going to look at the vertebral column ID sheet, and so this is going to be osteology, and we're going to use the online cadaver dissection tool through the McGraw-Hill Connect access that should come with your book. And so we're on the skeletal module, and if you haven't interacted with this website yet, hopefully this will kind of help you learn how to navigate the website and all the cool things that you can find on here, because there's a lot of cool stuff that you can highlight and kind of see different views of different things. So first, here's our vertebral column. As you can see, we have the posterior, lateral, and anterior view. This is superior and then inferior. And so first we're going to look at the cervical vertebrae. And so that is our most superior 7. So there's 7 of these. Cervical C, so we'd label them C1, C2, all the way through C7. This top one is also known as atlas. And then the second one, C2, is also commonly known as axis. So you're most likely to hear them called atlas and axis, but they are also numbered and counted in the 7 cervical vertebrae. So next we have the thoracic vertebrae. So that's going to be the next 12. So T1 through T12. And then below that we have the lumbar vertebrae, and there are 5 of those, L1 through L5. Then we have the sacrum, which is fused vertebrae. So these are going to be 5 fused vertebrae. So it's one complete bone. They have been fused. And then the bottom is called the coccyx, your tailbone, and that can be 3 to 5 fused vertebrae. So next we're going to look at some features that are common to all vertebrae. So I'm going to look at the thoracic vertebrae to kind of go over some of these key terms. So first we have our vertebral body, which is the main portion of this vertebrae, and that's what stacks. So it's this large body portion right here, the vertebral body. The vertebral foramen meaning hole, so it's going to be this large hole in the center, and that is where the spinal cord runs. Then we have the lamina, and that's going to be kind of this triangle chunk right here, and that is going to enclose the spinal cord. Then we have the spinous process, that's going to be most posterior, and so that's what you feel when you touch your spine. That's going to be those bony processes that are sticking out. And then on the lateral sides, we have the transverse processes. So you can see them here as well, sticking out laterally, and your spinous process sticking out posteriorly. Then we have the superior and inferior articulating processes. So I'll see if I can highlight on here. So here's going to be the process. This is the superior process. As you can see in here on the lateral view. And then the facet, when I think of facet, I think of face, is going to be the smooth portion of that process. So you also have inferior. That's the costal. So not that one, but it's going to be down here, and that's going to articulate with the superior articulating process of the vertebrae above. So where my mouse is right now, that is the inferior. So not this, that's highlighted. They don't have a highlight option for the inferior, but it's right where my mouse is. And so that is going to articulate with this process of the vertebrae located below. And then we have the vertebral discs, the intervertebral discs, excuse me. So if we go back here, I'll highlight those. Those are cartilage, and they fit in between the body of each of the vertebrae, and this provides cushion for movement. So you can have bulging discs, and if that cartilage is diminished, that can cause a lot of pain because then you have bone on bone, which is not very comfortable. As you can also see, you have different curvatures of your spine, so that's why it's important to maintain proper posture. So now we're going to look at some features that are different for each of the different categories of vertebrae. So first we're going to go to the cervical vertebrae. And so first you can see that there are these holes on both sides laterally, and those are the transverse foramen or foramina. And so these are only found on cervical vertebrae, and that is where the vertebral artery runs. So that's the first way you would distinguish that this is a cervical vertebrae. And then, like I said, there's different names for C1 and C2, so we're going to look at the atlas first. So as you can see, we still have the transverse foramen, where the vertebral artery runs, but this is going to be the most superior, and that is going to articulate with the occipital condyles of the skull. And then for C2, the axis, it is going to have a process called the dens or odontoid process. And so that's going to be found right here, and that is going to rotate with the atlas, So the dens is found on the axis, and that is going to rotate with the atlas, and that is how you turn your head. I'd recommend looking up a video to kind of see the motion of those two rotating. Now we're going to go to thoracic vertebrae. So as you can see, we don't have the lateral holes, the lateral foramen, so that's why there's no transverse foramen. We know that we are not in the cervical anymore. And how we tell these apart is that they have costal facets. So there's 3 of these. Not that one. There we go. Highlighted the wrong one. So here is one. You also don't have to be able to distinguish these. You just have to know that there are 3 costal facets. So there's one. So that one's superior. Then we have an inferior. And then we also have the transverse. And so again, facet, think face. There's going to be more flat areas. And these are going to be where the ribs articulate. So the ribs actually have 3 little facets on them as well that articulate which each of the 3 points on the thoracic vertebrae. Again, on the transverse processes, we can have muscles attached here. We can also have muscles attached to the spinous processes. You will see that when we go over the muscle charts with the attachments. And the next we go to lumbar. So they do not have any costal facets, and they do not have the transverse foramen. So that's how we know that they are lumbar, because they lack both of those 2 telltale signs. And these can also serve as muscle attachment points. Next, we're going to take a look at the sacrum. As I said, this is 5 fused vertebrae. So we'll look at some specific features. We have the promontory, which is kind of the flat surface on top, superior. And that is going to be where the bottom lumbar vertebrae, L5, articulates with the sacrum. And then we have the superior articulating facets, or superior articulating process, So many words that run together. So these are going to articulate with the inferior articular processes of the bottommost lumbar vertebrae, L5. That's going to articulate there. And then we have the ala, which I always think of as the wings. So it's best seen on the anterior view, but they're going to be laterally, and they're going to kind of flare out like wings. The transverse lines, they are not highlighted on this digital cadaver, but they are going to be these horizontal lines. They look like the spots where the fusion would have happened between those 5 fused vertebrae. So those horizontal lines right here. And those are seen on the anterior view. And then we have the median sacral crest. That's going to be on the posterior view. So crest is like a ridge, and so that's going to be kind of spiny, and you can feel that. And so that's going to be found on the posterior view. And then the coccyx is that bottom 3 to 5. That's your tailbone. You can break that. There's not really anything they can do when you break that, so I've heard it's very painful, but you just kind of have to sit and rest it out. It's not very fun if you even hit it on something hard. Next, we're going to look at our scapula. If I can find it on here. Oh, there we go. So that's going to be make up your shoulder blade. And so first we have our spine. That's going to be that ridge, and you can feel that on your own shoulder. It's a part that sticks out that you can really feel when you feel your shoulder on the posterior side. And then fossa. So we're going to have 2 different fossa areas, 3 technically if you count the glenoid. But first we're going to have, I can find it on the list. There we go. I don't know why I couldn't see it. It was right in front of my eyes. The supraspinous fossa. So if we think supra means above, and then we have our spine. So above the spine, and then a hole. So that will be serve as a place of muscle attachment. And then we have the infraspinous fossa. So infra, below. So we're going to go below the spine. Also serves as a place of muscle attachment. Then we have our coracoid process of the scapula. And so that is going to be here. You can see it more on the lateral view, but that's going to be more anterior. And then we have the acromion, which I skipped over. Sorry about that. The acromion is going to be more posterior, and that can be seen here on the lateral view. This is more posterior, and the corcoid is more anterior. And then we have the glenoid cavity, and that is going to articulate with your humerus, or the bone that makes up your upper arm. And so that is going to sit right here in that glenoid fossa cavity. And the last thing we'll look at is the clavicle. And so first we'll look at the sternal end. So if you can kind of tell here, it's more round on the end. So I kind of said it was like a more bulbous end. And that's what I thought of. And so sternal end helps you know sternal, it's going to articulate with the sternum. If we look at this picture up here of the whole skeleton, it's going to be the more medial end that articulates with your sternum. And then we have our acromion end, and that's going to be more flat, and that's going to articulate with that acromion process that we saw of the scapula. And also, this is not on your list, but we have the coronoid tubercle. And so that's going to be this little projection here. As you can see, you can't see it on the superior view, but you can see it on the inferior. And so that's how you know if you had the bone in front of you, you look for that conoid. I cannot talk. Sorry about that. Sorry you guys have to suffer through me talking through this video. It's been a long day. The conoid tubercle, and that's how you can tell how you should orient the bone to know if it's a left or right clavicle. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Jess, go to open lab hours, or you can always email me as well. Thanks for listening.